Hey noble ones, thank you so much for stopping by. I already made this video exactly 1 year ago. Back then there were 18 heroes, so now we've got 25. It's about time. In this video we will make a list of all the For Honor heroes from the weakest to the strongest if they were to fight in real life. So this list won't be based on in-game mechanics, but it will be based on the evaluation of their gear, thus armor and weapon, but also fighting style and individual strength and dexterity as it is from each character in their basic gear. If I had to consider all possible drops or advanced gear, this video would be exactly 26 months long. The basic logic of this list is that a hero in this list would have an advantage against the heroes before him, but would be at a disadvantage against the heroes in front of him on the list. Number 25. The Shaman. The Shaman is a thin-waisted, slightly ineffable, short, not particularly muscular woman. Now I can breathe. Fun fact, in-game she bites through metal plate armor. Who did that? Who's in charge of... A hatchet as a main weapon and a thick reverse knife as a secondary, held in the ice pick grip. Well, already dual wielders will be penalized on this list because dual wielding is a very hard skill to acquire, which only brings some benefits in a duel. It is a suicidal idea on a battlefield where arrows will be coming your way. Also, her weapons of choice are both short, which puts her at a further range disadvantage with basically all other heroes. Plus she's short, so multiply that exponentially. In the armor department, the Shaman defensive gear is almost non-existent. Her head is not protected. She has no armor on her hands, and she only has some sort of leather lower cannons protecting her forearms, and what seems to be a thick leather overcoat, which actually is completely open in the center, leaving her heart and core completely exposed. She does have a small buckler hanging on her back, which seems to be made of metal, but she never uses it. She would lose against the next hero because of her less range and less strength. 24. Shaolin. Guy's fit, very athletic and dynamic figure, kung fu, 90s, Hong Kong. Okay, I'm done. As a weapon, he's wielding a wooden staff with iron reinforced tips. The weapon grants him a reasonable range advantage, but he isn't able to neither pierce nor cut. The Shaolin only wears lower iron cannons as forearm protection and a pair of metal half greaves, but otherwise he's completely unprotected. Both his torso, center of mass, and his head and shoulders are left skin naked, which severely lowers his life expectancy on a real battlefield against armored and better geared warriors. He would have higher range and strength versus Shaman and has some range advantage versus next hero, but if we are to believe the game, the next hero is stronger and has a more vicious weapon. 23. Hitokiri. Shaved head, tough looking, getting better, yeah, almost there. Now, if we have to believe the game, she can lift that axe, so the girl is strong. As a weapon, the Hitokiri uses an axe, to be specific, a ono, although the actual Japanese ono looks like this. Two-handed axe is a good weapon. Usually you would only have one blade rather than two, but hey, using a two-handed weapon means renouncing to a shield. The only way in which this could be justifiable would be to wear a certain amount of armor to compensate the lack on the defense department. The Hitokiri instead wears virtually no armor, exception being a pair of non-Japanese looking half greaves, half cannons on her forearms and a little squares protecting the upper part of her arms. The skin of her bosom is exposed and she only wears a mask which doesn't seem to have any protective capability. The rest of her head and her throat are completely unprotected. The big axe is a more deadly weapon than the staff the Shaolin is using, although she's not armored enough against the slicing sharp blades of the next hero. 22. Shinobi. An agile, dexterous, fast, quick, rapid, lively, limber, I finished my adjectives, ninja. His weapons are the kusarigama, so basically the Japanese sickle or kama linked to a chain and a small iron weight. Regardless of what you might hear in ninjutsu schools, this is not and never was an effective weapon of choice. The kama is a repurposed farming implement. It's an improper weapon, not a battlefield specifically designed weapon. It's very difficult to wield and was not used by feudal Japanese professional troops, and considering the amount of war and battles that the Japanese had during the Sengoku period, that should tell you something. The shinobi is lightly armored. His head is only covered by the typical fictional ninja mask, but no metal protection nor helmet whatsoever. He has armored shoulders and arms, wooden armor as per his faction, more on that later, and some sort of thick leather top covering his upper torso but leaving his lower torso exposed, while his right leg is protected by a wooden knee protector and greave. An odd choice since his fighting style is mostly left foot forward. His sharp weapons would be effective against the unarmored previous heroes, but his advantage is only slight. Next hero is too armored for him. Number 21. Nu Xia. If you ask me, not physically imposing, just another paper cut survivor. As a weapon she wields two hook swords. which in Chinese are pronounced go. Not that you needed to know that, but I just like giving this sort of information. I'm very doubtful the real usefulness of these swords. They surely require a lot more training than usual swords to be wielded effectively, and historically they don't seem to have had any military application. They appear in none of the official listings of Chinese armaments, and believe me, I checked. Her upper body is mostly protected by some sort of leather armor. Although it covers her relatively well, her lack of any head protection together with the fact that her lower body lacks any protection still leaves her quite vulnerable to enemy attacks. She can use her armor to get closer and still resist against the shinobi, and then use her blades to cut through the lightly armored hero. Still, her exposed head and lack of strength would give her a disadvantage against the next hero, also because her armor seems to be light and not particularly protective. Number 20. The Berserker. The Berserker appears as a strong, ruthless Norseman, and he's gonna f you up, mate. He uses two axes as his weapons of choice. Axes were very good and effective weapons, but the best way to use an axe is to use it in combination with a shield, or alternatively use a two-handed axe to gain the range advantage. Using two axes in a battle would be again suicide. In the armor department, the Berserker is in trouble. He only has a small metal mask covering a little bit of his face, but has no helmet, and his garment is open in the center, exposing his torso. Only his shoulders seem to be protected, which is better than nothing, I suppose, but surely a warrior who lacks in his defense. To answer what some people said in the comments of the previous video, no, the rage of the Berserker wouldn't matter. A spear thrust in the heart would still stop you dead. Not well armored, his superior physical strength would give him an advantage versus Anusia, mostly because she's not using very effective weapons. His next opponent, however, has a more versatile weapon and probably has more physical strength than him. Number 19, the Jormungandr, I have no idea. He appears as a tough, strong, yes, side note, he actually looks a lot like my father. Like what? As a weapon he uses a warhammer. Now the warhammer would be an excellent choice as a battlefield weapon, particularly against armored warriors, but in general. Real historical warhammers will be a lot smaller. In fact, a warhammer to be effective doesn't need to be as big as a wheelbarrow, but it's a game. A warhammer this size would be incredibly tough to swing because of the huge difference in weight between the iron head and the wooden shaft, and interestingly enough, this kind of could explain the very weird grip he uses, very close to the top. Although it reduces dramatically the range the warrior is able to reach, a warhammer grip like that is basically used at punching distance. The torso of this warrior is left completely unprotected, and he only wears a pair of thick leather forearm protectors. His hands are completely exposed, and oddly enough, he walks bare feet. Bare feet. Maybe I need to reconsider the position of this guy. Good luck with that on the battlefield. A nail, a piece of glass, and he's out of combat. So yeah, if he walks on a nail, he becomes number 25 on this list. Considering how easily he wields the massive warhammer, the guy must be exceptionally strong, and I would imagine then stronger than the Berserker. The Berserker is better equipped, so this is a really close call. I'm giving the advantage to the Jormungandr just because a warhammer is you know, it's scary whether you're wearing armor or not. Number 18, Usha. You got ate your tuna mayoni giddy, mate. More protein, please. Protein, but cool hat. Still, jokes aside, he's okay. First, his choice of weapons. He's dual-wielding katana. His choice seems odd to me because he also carries two wakizashi, so the guy actually brings to battle two full pair of daisho, katana and wakizashi. He could go Miyamoto Musashi style and dual-wield the katana with a wakizashi, so long and short, but instead he chooses to dual-wield both katana, leaving the wakizashi on his belt. A little strange. The length of the katana gives him a small range advantage over the heroes I put before him on this list, so that justifies his placement. But then again, the Aramushi is another one of those heroes who's practically suicidal from a defensive perspective. The straw hat he wears would provide no protection, doesn't matter what you see in anime. His torso is again skin naked and completely exposed to piercing and disembowelment. His arms are also left unprotected, with his forearms only wrapped in bandages, and then he wears traditional kyakam, over which he has a pair of wooden greaves. Superior range against previous heroes, good slicing blades I suppose against non-armored and lightly armored, lacks range versus next hero, and a lot. Number 17, Nobushi. Probably the smallest and weakest looking character in the entire game. I don't even know why they bother bringing her to battle, and yet her weapon choice gives her a lot of points on this list, because I mean the naginata is a pole weapon, which already classifies as a very effective weapon on a battlefield, favoured by the samurai class of feudal Japan for so many years I can't even count, because it's a combination of a long pole married with basically the blade of a katana. This combination creates a very effective cutting weapon, which also gives you a tremendous range advantage. I personally prefer the yari, because I like spears more, but still the naginata is a very effective weapon. As armor is concerned, the normal shield lacks very much, only having a certain degree of asymmetrical protection, which is the reason why, regardless of the excellent weapon choice, she's down here on this list. She does have a wooden mask, which looks thicker and sturdier than the counterpart worn by the Hitokiri, but her head is still far from being considered adequately protected for battle. She wears a pair of half greaves made of wood, her right forearm has some armor, and she's also wearing what seems to be a small wooden sode, which is the shoulder padding, worn lower than you would normally wear it, for fashion I suppose. Again, only on the right side, her torso is only protected by clothing. She can overpower stronger opponents because of a superior range and effectiveness of the pole weapon, but she's too weak to stand a chance against the next particularly fast and strong hero. Number 16, the Gladiator. Now he looks like an energetic, agile, strong and relentless athlete. Like he really does have that physicality. Probably cool to hang out with, you know, having a couple of drinks and whatnot. His choice of weapon is the trident. The reason why they chose that is because in ancient Rome there was a class of gladiators called the Retiarius or Retiarius who actually did fight using a combination of trident and net. The small round shield he's carrying, however, looks loosely like the sort of shield used by the Hoplomachus, which is a different gladiatorial class, so he's a little bit of a mix. The trident does give some range advantage, but it isn't a weapon. It can be used as a weapon, but so can my PS4 become an improvised blunt implement of combat, but the simple fact that it can be done doesn't mean it will be an effective choice. In terms of armor, the gladiator is similarly dressed to an actual Roman gladiator, which means his torso isn't armored at all, although in ancient Rome this rule has some exceptions depending on the gladiatorial class. This of course puts him at a disadvantage against fully armored warriors, and he's weak against bladed implements. Now he can overpower the Nobushi in my mind using the shield and his agility to close in, and he's also clearly stronger. His next opponent, however, is too well armored to pull that off. Number 15, the Peacekeeper. That's scrawny. Oh, but I know what people are gonna say. Oh, she's so fast and he's so slow and blah 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 blah. Now let me get this straight. Big doesn't always mean slow. This guy is big and fast, and he had tigers. That's all I'm saying. As weapons, the Peacekeeper used an arming sword paired with a dagger, and this combination isn't unheard of in the Middle Ages. It was used for duels, and we find it in the treatises. So it's a cool combination, again for duels, but she can close in, she's got the armor. That's the true advantage of the Peacekeeper, the good quality armor she's wearing. She's wearing a great helm. I hate the hood over it, but that's just me. Her entire body is covered in what seems to be some sort of coat of plates, possibly over mail, few pieces of iron plate armor. She's also wearing plate half greaves. Not the best possible protection, but definitely better than nothing. Next hero is better though, because he's better armored and has more range. You're gonna take him on. Number 14, Jianjun, the General, appears as a well-equipped old man. His age will be taken in consideration in this list. He still isn't an ordinary old man. I understand that. This guy is a battle-hardened veteran who has decades of experience of real-life to death combat, but he still is an old man. His physique, strength, agility surely aren't what they used to be. I'm aware it is possible to use a younger version of him in-game, and if that were the case, he would score a couple of tiers higher on this list, but we are only considering basic gear, and his younger self is considered as a piece of gear. His weapon is Guandao, and which is the Chinese pole weapon the Japanese copied when creating the naginata. And the general is also very well armored. So the weapon is good, the armor is good. He's wearing a full suit of what seems to be iron armor. The only downside to his equipment is the lack of any helmet in the basic set. Full body armor can sustain slashes from blades, still too old to face someone as strong as the next hero. Number 13, the Warlord. Strong, tough, beer drinking, battle hardened Norse warrior. What more do you want? His choice of weapon is a sword paired with a Norse round centered boss shield. The sword and shield combination is a nice combination of defense and attack, which makes a warrior tougher to beat if faced with a sword only or with two swords. It's a good combo versus unarmored enemies or against enemies who don't have a shield, but it will give you a disadvantage against fully armored warriors, as the sword is not a good weapon to use against metal armor in general. In terms of armor, the Warlord is mostly wearing head leather armor and shoulders. His arms are protected with mail, and his apron also has some mail, but for some reason he doesn't use mail for the rest of his body, at least in his basic forms. Maybe he couldn't afford it. He doesn't have the best degree of protection, but light armor paired with a shield and a metal helmet is reasonable gear. Although the sword is not a very good weapon to use against armored opponents, he's a lot stronger and fitter than the old general, as we said. But again, the general has no helmet, this guy has got a helmet and a shield, and he's a lot bigger. The Warlord loses against the next hero because he's huge and well armed. Number 12, the Raider. The Raider is a huge, muscular, giant Norse warrior. I wouldn't want to face him in battle. Nope. And neither would you. No, you wouldn't. And no. I know you've got black belt in karate. No, you wouldn't. No, but what are you saying? He's slow, so slow, super slow. He would never catch me. I would do this and that and this and that and blah, 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 blah. His choice of weapon is good. He's using a Danax, which also has a hammerback for blunt force damage. The weapon looks good, but compared to the real Danax, as it often happens in games, the blade is too thick. But we'll consider the guy is extremely strong, because he is extremely strong, so we'll give that a pass. Armor is interesting because the guy does have an iron helmet on his head. He has got that part covered. He also has what seems to be leather shoulder guards with some fur. But the main problem is his torso. He basically has no protection whatsoever, showing his muscles, bodybuilding, whatnot. Even clothing would have been a much better choice, mate. If you let a blade run through his skin, it will rip it open, regardless of the muscles. Now, his size will give him a big advantage in combat, but the moment a better armored warrior will face him, the odds will go in favor of that warrior, even if it is a weaker warrior. The Danax will give him a certain level of range advantage, and that's why I put him after the sword and shield warlord. Also because the guy is very tall, so the range advantage is even higher. But because of his lack of armor, he will lose against the next well-armored sword-wielding hero. Number 11. Orochi. The Orochi looks like a medium-built, squishy, even though armor, inconsiderate but fun, sushi-eating warrior. That was a mouthful. His choice of weapon is the katana. Now, yes, the katana was a battlefield weapon, a backup weapon, not a main weapon. Spears and bows were. That's why this guy doesn't manage top 10. The reasons why he's still scored relatively high on this list is because he does wear a full suit of samurai armor, which protects him from head to toe. The Orochi is in full battle gear, but he loses against the next very similar hero because of range. Top 10. Number 10. The Kenzi. The Kenzi looks like a legit samurai. そうですね。この人は本当にすごいですよ。でも、寿司が好きなんですけれども、やはりラーメンの方がいいんですよね。Do what? His weapon of choice is the Nodachi, and a very long one at that. Probably not a particularly easy to wield weapon, but it will provide a very good range advantage. The Kenzi also has a full set of armor. It looks older style, like loosely inspired on Muromachi era armor, but still a very well protected warrior indeed. So because of the fact that he's wearing full armor, and because of the fact that he's got a range advantage over the Orochi, I'm giving him an advantage. Also, the Kenzi is clearly physically stronger than the Orochi. He loses against the next hero because he loses the range advantage, because of the size of the next hero, who is also, by the way, wielding an anti-armor weapon. Number 9. Shugoki. The Shugoki appears as a huge, strong and fat, and he is fat, I don't care, he's your main, the guy is strong and fat, warrior with both muscles and fat, probably trained in a similar manner to the Japanese sumo. So basically, if he wants that chair, just go. From his executions, we see he's able to crush the skull of an opponent barehanded. I mean, so you can say whatever you want, he's a beast, but he's also exceptionally strong. As a weapon, he chooses to wield a thick wooden cannonball with iron spikes, and that's a nasty weapon. I do have a replica of something very similar to it. It is a bit unwieldy, but it does have a real punch to it. Now, the Shugoki is also somewhat armored. In this case, we have planks of thick wood fastened in overlapping rows. Wooden armor wouldn't need a whole video. And guess what? I actually made it, link in the description below. But it would still be better than wearing nothing, and also maybe in this universe, wood is, I don't know, better? Whatever. His hands and right forearm are also partially protected and very good. He wears a thick mask, probably the most protective in game, but the rest of his head and throat are still unprotected, so not optimal. Of course, he can use his incredible strength to match or outmatch previous heroes, and has much better coverage in terms of armor, uses the cannonball to smash their shields and helmets, and can nullify the range advantage even of some pole weapon wielders because he is massive and the cannonball is big too. Loses against the next hero because he also has a similar armor, maybe even better, and a slight range advantage. Number 8. The Highlander. Only one will survive. Strong, big, tough, short-tempered, yes. His weapon of choice is a Scottish greatsword, and it is massive. Greatswords were used historically, although this one is particularly huge. The Highlander is very strong to be able to wield such a massive sword so well. He also has scale torso protection made probably of boiled leather, good shoulder protection and some limb protection too. He can use his range to hit the Shugoki from a safe distance, although he only has a very slight advantage against the Shugoki, so this would be a close call. He loses against the next hero because he's in a complete suit of armor, metal armor. Number 7. Centurion. Roma Invicta. The Centurion looks like a highly motivated, a bit nasty, blunt, quite aggressive overachiever, also probably bullying everyone in school. Anyways, guy's a pro. His weapon of choice is the Roman Gladius, But of course, specifically his version is a bit in between a Mainz and a Pompeii Gladius. The weapon choice would be good if it was paired with a scutum, so the Roman shield, which is how this weapon was supposed to be used as a set. In terms of Ranger, Centurion is at a disadvantage, so what the heck is he doing at number 7? The armor mate. He's wearing a full metal armor which covers most of his body and his head, and he's fit and he's strong. Also, his arms are protected. His legs are protected partially. In his basic set, he's wearing a lorica musculata, so muscle cuirass, which provides some solid protection for his torso. Possibly not the best mobility, but doesn't seem to bother him. All this armor would probably allow him to try and get closer to an armored warrior, so have a range advantage over him, and go for stab, 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 and stab. Maybe a few slashes, but another stab. Unfortunately, his lack of a shield and range don't allow him to score higher on this list. He overpowers the Highlander in my mind because he can take a sword hit and still survive thanks to his armor. Also in-game, whenever he punches someone, he stuns them no matter the size, so this guy knows how to throw a punch. If he also had a shield, he would have scored higher on the list, but loses against the next opponent. Number 6, Tiandi. Sharp, that's the word for this guy. Guy is sharp. Sharper than his sword. His weapon of choice is inspired on the Chinese Dao, the Chinese traditional single-edged sword. He switches between one-handed and two-handed usage, although predominantly his guards involve one-handed grip. His sword specifically looks like a good chopper, a good weapon to use against unarmored opponents or lightly armored enemies. The Tiandi is very well armored, his body being covered in what seems to be iron armor, inspired on Chinese armor. The helmet leaves the face exposed, so it's not the most protective, for example some of the knights' helmets, but it grants better vision, better ability to breathe, so there are pros and cons with this specific design. He can beat the Centurion because they both lack a shield, but the Tiandi is more covered in armor than the Centurion is, and his sword is a bit longer, giving him a slight range advantage. He loses against the next hero because of her excellent choice of weapon combined with a shield he lacks. Top 5. Number 5. Valkyrie. Out of all the women in this game, I think the Valkyrie looks like the strongest. You can actually see her arms, they have sculptured muscle. She looks like a bodybuilder a little bit, and I think she's moody, mate. Very moody. Don't upset her, just don't. Her weapon of choice is excellent. She wields a spear and a round shield strapped to her arm. The spear looks actually good, thick wooden shaft with a properly shaped spearhead of iron. The weapon gives her some range advantage, while the shield, although small, can close some lines of defense as she performs her attacks. In terms of armor, she wears a masked metal full helmet which provides reasonable protection. Her shoulders and upper body are protected by some leather armor, and all her limbs have also some form of hardened leather protection. Not the best again, particularly if compared to proper steel armor, but still much better than going to war without anything. She can keep enemy at bay, use her spear quickly to stab at a distance, probably the most effective weapon on the battlefield, to pierce and aim at unarmored spots, and use her shield in combination to close lines. Never underestimate the effectiveness of spear and shield combination in combat. She loses against the next hero because too well armored to pull that one off. Number 4, Vortiger. The Blackbriar looks like a badass trained Assassin's Creed wannabe knight, and after saying all that, I need a drink. His weapon set is what appears to be an arming sword paired with a big kite shield. Bringing a big shield on a battlefield is an excellent choice. Now the Vortiger is quite well armored, more on that later. And when you are that well armored, a shield becomes an option rather than a necessity. Still, the shield he's wielding is going to close in lines of defense much better than any weapon could. His sword tapers towards the tip and it has a pointy point, suggesting that it is intended to be used also as a thruster. So though warhammers and maces would outperform the sword against armored opponents, on the flip side, his sword and shield combo would do very well against lightly armored or unarmored enemies. In his basic set, the Vortiger is armored with a full suit of mail covered with textile, and his limbs and shoulders are covered in full plate armor. His excellent armor together with his shield is what got him up to number 4, but unfortunately his lack of a helmet doesn't allow me to score him any higher. I do know he does have a helmet as an option for further sets, but we are just reviewing basic sets, so even if with a full helmet he could have easily scored number 2, I have to be fair, and even if he's my favorite and my main, I have to be consistent with the criteria of this list. He wins over the Valkyrie because she can only pierce him in the head. All the rest of his body is too well armored, and he can close that line of defense with his massive shield while closing in to finish her off. Loses against the next hero because both being very well armored, the next hero also has the advantage of a full helmet. Number 3, the Conqueror. Looks a bit like a mix between a knight and a transformer. for some reason. It's kind of funny because he's armored like a knight, but he's dodgy, nasty, naughty. What about chivalry, you say? Chivalry? Chivalry and the Conqueror. He's a criminal, pal. Where do you think he got the chains? Probably Elder Scrolls protagonist. His weapon choice is rather unusual. That's why he doesn't score at number 2. Even for the medieval times, that would be unusual. The flail was a very exotic weapon which features only rarely on period arts and always has a two-handed weapon. Also, his flail specifically has a weird shaft to chain proportion whereby the chain is too long for the shaft he's using, making it even more difficult to use safely than already is. The heater shield used by the Conqueror is instead an excellent choice, probably the best in this case. Period examples would have no metal rim and would be half the thickness with the wood being covered in textile cover, but still wielding a shield that size in combat when fully armored is a better choice because with the development of plate armor, handheld shields became smaller and more practical to use as an effective defense-offense implement. The Conqueror is excellently armored, a primitive great helm and some sort of coat of plate in his torso. He wins against the Vortiger because he has a more complete suit of armor, and although his shield is smaller, it still is big enough to do a perfect job. Even historical kite shields went out of fashion in favor of heater shields, so smaller versions, when armor started developing more, proving this size of shield would be better suited for a fully plated armor warrior. Loses against the next hero because of almost a century and a half of more modern gear. Number 2, the Warden. Now that's what I'm talking about. You can see because the guy likes his armor. He has probably been training in armor since he was 2 years old. I can imagine the full suit of newborn armor he had tailored for him. Honestly, he looks like that sort of guys who, you know, tell jokes and whatnot, but if you rub him wrong, guy snaps, you don't want to be around. Now he's using a longsword. Medieval longswords are very effective and multi-purpose weapons. It can be used to cut, but also thrust. By looking at medieval treatises, you also know that in case of a fully armored opponent, the sword could also be used upside down, and he actually does it in game. Fantastic. To deliver the so-called murder stroke, or alternatively it could be turned into a much more powerful stabbing implement using the half swording grip to seek for the gaps of the armor. Although not as effective as a pole weapon or a warhammer, the longsword has reasonable reach, good versatility, and it's an excellent weapon against unarmored while still being useful against armored opponents. 2. In terms of armor, the Warden also wears full plate with the exception of a mail hauberk with a coat of plates on top, but his helmet and general armor shape looks a lot more up to date if compared to the armor worn by the Conqueror. His helmet features a visor, which means the Warden is also able to open the visor in situation needs without having to take the whole helmet off. He can just hinge it up, hinge it down whenever he needs it, breathe a little bit, so much more optimal. He loses against the next hero because, well, because they all do. Number 1. The Lawbringer. The one you don't want to mess with. If you see him coming, change city, change nation, change planet, just go. A mountain of a man, strong enough to lift anyone up and break their neck bare hand, and the most armored knight in the entire game. Look at the physicality. Ciao bello, ciao. Ciao, grazie, arrivederci, pasta, pizza, gelato, ciao. The Lawbringer is the strongest For Honor hero in real life because of a whole series of reasons. First, he's using a pole weapon, which, as we have said multiple times already, grants him an excellent range advantage that, paired with him being extremely tall, gigantic, it means that most of the times he will be able to hit you and hurt you from safe distance. The poleaxe he's wielding is a very versatile weapon. It has a sharpened blade for cutting, a blunt back for smashing enemies in armor, and a pointy spike for thrusting. The Lawbringer has the best armor in game, featuring a full suit of plate armor worn over a mail shirt. Then before you say it, yes he can move, yes he can run. I've got a million videos to prove to you that you can move in a full suit of plate armor. Given his is a little bulky, but again the guy's a frigging giant. The armor makes him an incredibly difficult enemy to wound, which paired with his exceptional strength, size and effective weapon make him the strongest For Honor hero in real life. He beats everyone else because of his size, strength, range advantage, versatile pole weapon and superior armor. But I hope that you really enjoyed this video. It was very long, so I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your list. Who do you think should be the first and strongest For Honor warrior? Thank you so much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.